Today, I will be presenting my summative assessment data review. So, what does the data say? Some of the data pinpoints. This is a summative pre-test for Unit 4 in a fourth grade ELA class. This is an inclusion class that includes students that are in special education as well as general education, gifted students, and students that are also in early intervention plans. The purpose of the data, we're using it to identify students in need of additional support as it relates to the new unit and moving forward as it relates to the new unit. Helps with specific targets and learning targets within Unit 4. And the importance of data is we're going to make informed decisions based on this data. So, what that means is when we're looking at our pre assessment for our Unit 4, we take the things that we see students scoring lower at, and we use those to conduct or form different strategies in our classrooms as it relates to the different skill sets and levels of the students. So, what that means ultimately is we gather data, we look at the data, we then make decisions based on data. From that, we take it and we go in and we learn how to differentiate our lessons as it relates to not only whole group, but looking at small group instruction as it relates to stations and student driven or facilitated classrooms. So here we have a passage. It is called Born to Dance. Here, students have read a prompt, and the following questions will be answering based on this passage. So, the first question reads: what does the narrator's mother first give her daughter that sparks a lifelong interest? As you can see, the answer is a ballet book, and 100% of the students answer this correctly. This is great because this would be a question or skill that you will not have to go over so much as it relates to students in the classroom. Here, our question reads: the narrator feels disappointed when we have 63% of students answered is not accepted to a company, 13% answer is unable to learn the dance positions, and 25% answered discovers that dance companies are located in Europe. As we can see, those that answered the first answer, which is not accepted to a company, this is their correct answer. So those students that answered those correctly would not have to work on this particular skill. This is still centered around main idea and looking for supporting details. But with these particular students that are in this 63%, we would not have to look at them so much as it relates to um, this particular skill set. Okay. These students that are here in the 13% and 25%, we will get the names of these students and we will put them in small groups and have them working on individual assignments as it relates to supporting details and main idea. Here we have another that is centered around the same. We see that 63% of these students answer this correctly, which is awesome. The other percent of the students, we would have to look at them closely. And this is probably, of course, those same kids, as we can see that the data speaks for itself in both of these questions or answers that were given by the students. Here we have, we're matching the correct element of the plot next to the sentence to form a selection. We see that only 13% of the students are familiar with the term climax as it relates to parts of a story. So, this would be a skill that I would suggest going over in a whole group form because we still need to look at what resolution is, what rising action is, and what a climax is. So this would be a whole group instruction because students need to be familiar with these terms as it relates to parts of a story. Going forward, we're looking at setting. We see that 75% of the students answer this correctly, and the other students, this other 26%, we would look at them, put them in a small group, maybe a teacher led small instructional group to help them get the proper instruction that they would need, possibly some peer tutoring as well. Again, we're looking at setting here. We see about 63%. So, as you can see, going through this PowerPoint presentation, the data is seeming to look very, very familiar. And we see that some of the things are becoming a little repetitive as it relates to these students who are in this 38th percentile. Okay. So going again, looking at setting, looking at parts of the story, this would be a small group. Of course, reviewing with the whole class, but make sure to really, really dive deep and really get those students that are lacking this skill set. Here we're looking at point of view, so first person. We see that 63% of the students answer this correct. We're still looking at those same percentage of students who are lacking in that area. Here we're moving on to third person point of view. We have 50% of students that understand this question, another 50% that do not. This would again be a concept or skill that I would teach in whole group, something that I would really dive deep into with definitely gradual release type of instruction, going in really deep with an activator, the mini lesson, guided instruction, and then putting them, of course, at the end in their own um, student groups or individual groups, and ending off with an exit ticket that will help me kind of get some type of understanding of where they are, their depth of knowledge or their level of knowledge. This was something that I would continue to do and make sure that they are understanding those skill sets. Here we're looking at a question that is centered around author's purpose. This is again a question that definitely needs to be hit head on in a whole group instruction. We have 25% of the students that understand this concept, and the rest of them are definitely lacking. So this would be one to definitely hone in on. Next, we're going into a word study on this particular summative assessment. 1 through 5, all are related to either knowing what a word means as it relates to base words, syllables, or control vowels, and so forth. So just looking at the data, we see that students, this would definitely need to be another whole group instruction as it relates to all of these concepts. Again, because this class is so diverse, it's full of diversity. It is important that you are tackling this issue with full head-on differentiated instruction. So every day may not be a small group type of day. It may be one of those whole group situations that gradually and slowly turns into the small group or independent learning. Here again, we're looking at more and grammar type of language arts. So we're looking at prepositions and going into looking at paragraphs and subject verb agreement. Um, we see here that students are familiar with the parts of speech. There, we have a lot that responded correctly on that. But again, something again that we have to delve in on, making sure we're using this data effectively and doing what we need to do with it. This is some more of our phonics, um, regular verbs that require the ed. Again, mixed reviews on understanding. So when preparing lessons, have to be sure that we're honing in on making sure to, since we use Savvis has a lot of components, a lot of different instructional intervention worksheets, guided readings, making sure to pull those instructional materials out to ensure that we are captivating what needs to be done in the classroom. And again, here looking at the parts of speech, looking at how a sentence has been changed. The same thing is stated on the last slide. All right. So, what are some gaps in the instruction and assessment? Of course, as we can see, the foundational reading skills, struggling with phonemic awareness, decoding, fluency, and comprehension. These are things that impact a student's learning, specifically as it relates to ELA. By the time a student is in fourth grade, you're supposed to be applying those skills learned in early elementary from K through 3. So at this point, the phonemic awareness, decoding, fluency, all these things should have been mastered before this point. But of course, that is in a perfect world, and we know we have to meet our students where we are. So that's when we get the data, as stated before, and we're moving into number two here, getting into that tier one instruction, and some intervention instruction too. But because this is a inclusion class, we have to make sure that our individualized instruction is pinpointed or head on to our students that do lack. So those students that do have the IEPs, ensuring that we are meeting them where they are, ensuring that we have the proper help in the classroom as it relates to co-teaching and so on. And what are some of the next steps? Continuing to get coaching from instructional coaches. That's why they are here, collaborating and developing personalized strategies. Along with that, we're going to provide ongoing professional development for teachers, offering regular training as it relates to implementing those IEPs in the classroom. Again, making sure that we have what we need as it relates to meeting the students where they are. And lastly, ongoing intervention, continuing to collect data and allow that data to drive instruction in the classroom. It is so important that these tests are not taken in vain. When we get pre-tests, post-tests, any type of formative, summative, the data has to be analyzed. And it's so important that this data is analyzed. Because this is a pre-test that was just shown, the teacher definitely has the autonomy to go in, really get rigorous with the instruction, really hone in on those students that are upper to keep them moving, but also to get those students that need those intervention pieces and that needs the IEP services to ensure that we are meeting the students where they are. So when the post test does come, it is data that looks better than what we saw. Of course, it takes work. Of course, it takes time. Of course, it takes planning. That's why it's important in the midst of between a pre and a post, you are doing formatives. You are getting students to answer questions along the way. You're checking for understanding, making sure that students are understanding what is being taught to them and what it is that they need to learn.